Thank you very much. President Ramaphosa, Deputy President Mbumba, former President Mbeki and Mrs. Mbeki, former President Motlanthe and Mrs. Motlanthe, Mrs. Machel and Premier Makura, and then ministers and dignitaries. But first and foremost, Julisa and Thandi, and the Modise and the Mbokwe families. It's an honor for me to be one of the persons asked today to talk about our beloved friend, Billy Modise. But first of all, and on behalf of the Swedish government and of the Swedish people, I would like to thank Billy for making the Swedish society aware of the unjust and immoral system that was apartheid. You woke us up, Billy. Through your tireless explaining of the injustice and cruelty of this awful system, and through your strong argumentation for boycotts and sanctions, you made the Swedes aware of the crimes committed, and you made us engaged in the struggle for democracy and human rights. And for this, we thank you very much. I also have a greeting from the Swedish government through the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annika Söder, who would have liked to be with us here today, but I will quote her words. Billy was not only a good and lovely friend, Billy was also, in its deepest sense, a wise person, a person who knew his values, his ethical compass, and stood by them. A statesman, a true freedom fighter, and I'm glad I got to meet him yet again on my latest visit to South Africa 2 years ago. His wisdom and warmth will stay with us forever. End of quote. And I would like, on my part, to tell the story about how Billy, early on after his arrival in Sweden on a scholarship to the University of Lund in 1960, how Billy took on the then Prime Minister of Sweden, Tage Erlander. Tage Erlander was an alumni of the University of Lund and came annually to Lund to speak to the students. And when the formalities and the speeches were over, Billy, as always on the go, made his way up to the Prime Minister and told him what was going on in South Africa and asked him to introduce boycott and sanctions on South African products. So Tage Erlander listened very carefully to Billy and then made the point that Swedish law did not permit him to introduce sanctions against the country with which Sweden was not at war, and we were not at war with South Africa. But, he said to Billy, please go ahead and lobby the Swedes for a change in legislation, and I shall be more than happy to oblige. And Billy set about engaging the Swedes, biking and hitchhiking around the country. He talked to political parties, to student organizations, to the labor movement, to women's associations, to churches. Well, he spoke to everyone he could possibly reach. And with convincing facts and arguments, Billy reached results. But I would also contribute his success to his gentle, persuasive powers and his mischievous and charming personality. Few could resist Billy. And before long, the Swedes were engaged and active. Consumer boycotts were initiated. It was no longer okay to buy Cool marmalade or South African fruit. Demonstrations were held and collections for funds were arranged. Choirs gave concerts in Zulu and Xhosa to raise money for the struggle. And the Swedish government initiated, with broad support in the Swedish parliament, what was later to become a very substantive contribution to the struggle against apartheid. And this, all of this, very much thanks to a young South African student. Billy and Julisa, of course, made many friends in Sweden and continued to do so when you were in Lusaka, working for the UN Institute for Namibia. And since Billy's passing, many Swedish friends have contacted me with stories about their contacts and life together with Billy and Julisa, about their children sharing the same daycare center, of collaborating on joint projects, or just spending delightful evenings together in Sweden or in Lusaka. I have to say, I have not heard so much about the ballroom dancing, but then the Swedes are not good dancers. But definitely a lot about taking in the musical scene together and maybe consuming some refreshments as well. I think it was very appropriate that Billy was sent back as ANC's official representative to Sweden in 1988, and was then instrumental in arranging the visit of Nelson Mandela to Stockholm in March 1990. A visit that was officially to say thank you for Sweden's support during the struggle, but I think most importantly, for Nelson Mandela to go and visit and meet with his old friend Oliver Tambo, who was then receiving rehabilitation care in Stockholm. And who could have been a more perfect master of ceremony at this emotional event than Billy? And Billy continued to play an important part in Swedish-South African relations. I would say that Billy Modise has been the best Swedish ambassador in South Africa ever. To hear Billy talk about his second home country, Sweden, in a very favorable terms, that was always a pleasure for the official Swedish ambassador. He had a strong faith in Sweden and in our capability to meet our challenges, something that felt very reassuring when we sometimes doubt ourselves. And he was the eternal charmer. When Billy joined in the seminars recently organized about Olof Palme, it was around him that the students gathered afterwards. And you have to excuse me, President Motlanthe, but it was Billy's stories they wanted to listen to afterwards. And for all his efforts in mobilizing the Swedes and his continued strong friendship with Sweden, King Carl Gustaf XVI last year bestowed him with the decoration as Commander of the Royal Order of the Polar Star. And I'm so glad that many of you here today could share this important evening with Julisa, Tandy, and myself. It was certainly a memorable evening. And the Modise family have always been and will continue to be dear guests of the embassy. It was always such a delight to have Billy arriving, very proudly asking in his best Swedish, "Hur mår du?" and then blinking with the light on his walking stick, immediately becoming the center of the party. So Billy, you had star power. From your dashing days as a student in Lund to the mischievous gentleman you became, with your strong integrity and great wisdom, you will always remain an icon to all of us. So finally, from your Swedish friends, farväl, vi kommer att sakna dig. Vila i frid, käre Billy. Thank you very much.